In this video, I sat down with our machine learning engineer and data scientist, Tanner Ducharme.
If you don't have a good intuition for what the data really mean, or what problem you're really trying to solve on a deep level, and for the needs of your industry, how your model could actually be beneficial, that's really going to
go beyond the hype and talk realistically what it means to work in AI. If we go on this trend and more people from different fields get into machine learning or AI, how do you value domain expertise as a machine learning engineer?
I'd say domain expertise is pretty critical. The terminology can get mixed up between the distinction between a data scientist and a machine learning engineer. And oftentimes depends on the organization and there is lots of overlap. But in my experience, a data scientist is more on the model development side and less on the engineering side. And I think domain expertise is especially critical if you are a data scientist, because if you don't have a good intuition for what the data really mean, or what problem you're really trying to solve on a deep level, and for the needs of your industry, how your model could actually be beneficial, that's really going to put a ceiling on how good of a data scientist you can be and how much value you can actually bring to your field. I've seen many examples, like I did a deep learning internship in an entertainment company. We were developing audio models, and I went in knowing nothing about audio models. And I found what to be the most beneficial is after I got up to speed, I had a boss who was he's not really a programming guy, not a machine learning guy at all. He'd been a signal and sound engineer for 40 years. And even though he had only learned machine learning on the go as his company pivoted, he was a really valuable resource in terms of the nitty-gritty of the audio side of different ways to try to augment our data, like creating different kinds of filters that he'd used in his job before that are pretty commonplace if you're a basic audio engineer. By combining our skill set essentially, and him providing me with suggestions for how to manipulate the audio useful for the model and then implementing it, we were able to get some pretty good results. And that's just one quick example, but I think it applies to pretty much every industry. You need some baseline knowledge to be decent. If you don't know anything, you're not going to be successful. And then there's no ceiling on how useful you know. You're never done. You can always learn more about the industry, and you can always, as a result, become a better data scientist.
Let's imagine that somebody wants to get into AI space, and they are not necessarily coming from a machine learning background, but maybe they've been in a medical industry, law, or financials, and they are bringing this domain expertise. What are the ways that people can actually get into the space?
I think the first thing you have to do is define your end goal more carefully. It could be as easy as just learning how to properly use LLMs like GPT or Claude, and maybe some more advanced use cases, not just typing in a prompt and getting a result, but maybe using them for coding ability, them for data analysis abilities. And those things can, with just a couple months of practice and work, can turn into pretty valuable skill increase. Probably for a lot of people would be useful at their jobs right now. So the barrier to entry for that is pretty low. It's just practicing, learning a bit of theory, and you're probably good to go. Now, your question is, get into the AI space. I want to be a machine learning engineer at Amazon. It's going to take significantly more work. You don't necessarily have to go to school. You don't have to get a degree. But if you don't have the degree, you're going to have to put in a substantial amount of work, probably have some extremely impressive projects on your portfolio, on your resume, and you might be able to expedite it in the sense that you could probably do that if you're extremely smart and talented in less time than it would take to get a degree. If you're trying to be a top engineer at this company, I wouldn't really think of it as there's no quick shortcut. It's simply doable. I know people who dropped out of their undergraduate degree and now are engineers making lots of money at high profile companies. But unfortunately, people don't want to hear this. Those people are usually the exception. Not saying it's not doable. If you're an intelligent, highly motivated individual, you can start with self-learning. There's things like boot camps, which can not be the end goal, but boot camps can be an excellent resource for just starting off your journey and then working on projects.
I'm so glad that you brought up boot camps. Recently, Simply Learn reached out to me, and they are the #1 in the world boot camp for technology, business, and programming training. They shared with me their Masters in Artificial Intelligence Engineering program, which is part of the AI and machine learning category. And this program is 11 months. So obviously less than 4-year degree, but in 11 months, you get to work on 25 industry relevant AI projects. So, if you want to do it as a side to your existing job, they have weekend classes. The bootcamp is designed in collaboration with IBM. And among live sessions, we also host Ask Me Anything sessions, masterclasses, and hackathons with IBM experts. So what you get at the end, not only the experience and projects, but you get also certification, both from Simplilearn, which is well industry recognized, but also IBM certificate. And another great thing that Simplilearn provides financing for their bootcamps. I always thought that bootcamps are super expensive in tens of $1,000s. But talking with Tanner and also looking in different Simplilearn programs, I'm excited to say that Simplilearn is supporting this channel now. If you're interested and have financial means, maybe join over 17,000 people who took this course in their next cohort. Visit the link in the description below to get more familiar with Simplilearn. It's just so amazing that now in the digital world, you can learn a lot already from online, from your comfort and maybe side to your existing job. I'm curious also from your side, on the very practical side, what are the tools that you would use day to day as a machine learning engineer?
That really depends on where you are and the scope of your project. But the ones that jump out to me immediately, the obvious ones like Python, everyone's using Python. R is mostly just done in academic circles, and I've never heard of anyone who actually uses R for machine learning engineering at their job. You're going to want to learn about the full tech stack in terms of model deployment. So that includes starting at the data side of things, learning how databases work, data pipelines, possibly if you're a full machine learning engineer, you might have to learn about different tools in the Apache, like Airflow and Kafka for streaming data into your model. You're going to have to know on the more modeling side, besides Python, the actual libraries you build their model. And there's tons of different libraries depending on what your application is, but generally, you're going to want to use a basic machine learning framework for, on the simpler side, things like sklearn or scikit-learn for more classic machine learning models. And then for getting into more advanced deep learning, there'll be a library that are used to compose complicated deep learning models, such as TensorFlow, PyTorch. And then after that, you're probably going to want to learn about how to deploy models. So that's going to involve learning about different cloud provider, like AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, how to actually create endpoints to deploy models and keep them there, how to finish up your data pipeline going from original data source to machine learning model, back out to the consumer. It involves knowledge about back-end knowledge of how applications and websites work generally. And then also, like I said before, tools for monitoring those models and retrain. And all of this has to be orchestrated into one cohesive system that should work, ideally, minimum human intervention. Obviously, that's not always easy, but to be a good machine learning engineer, you're going to want to understand all of the tools required and everything. Although I would say start with databases, general data practices, Python, and then one of those libraries I mentioned before. And I'd actually like to speak to maybe more about the daily life of a data scientist, because as I was explaining, kind of all of the scary prerequisites you need to be successful in machine learning, that's the big accusation people like us get a lot. We try to make it sound like it's impossible and scary. And while I do believe everything I said about being a successful machine learning engineer, I think the barrier to entry for being a good data scientist, especially at a small company, I think that barrier to entry is lower. Because you don't always need a fully sophisticated productionized tech system that works automatically at every single level to be a data scientist. It can be as simple as having some domain knowledge, some programming knowledge, understanding the machine learning basics, and even just a pretty simply trained model that you get from scikit-learn or something like that can have pretty immediate impact on a company's operations with only a couple months of work. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. It can be as simple as just, hey, we want to predict X for whatever, for revenue, for demand, for forecasting sales, for some industrial application. And you can take the data from your company, you can set up a model pretty quickly, and you can get some actionable insight immediately. And that's still valuable if it's used in the right way.
Basically getting into AI field, it's not just machine learning engineering. What
No.
you're saying that actually if you bring domain expertise and years of experience, learning about data science, it's probably a smoother way to get into. Any kind of last tips for people wanting to get into AI at all levels? How are you enjoying this field and what is your kind of projections? Is it exciting to continue? Even with job market challenges and all that.
Yeah, I expect the job market challenges will resolve themselves enough. Maybe I was a bit over optimistic about how many job offers I'd receive upon graduation, but I'm not personally worried about my long-term future. And with respect to people who are trying to get into the field, like I said, I think the most important thing is to, first of all, to really closely define what your goals are. There's a difference between being an analyst in a small company and learning enough where you can use Python, use a basic machine learning to immediately add some sort of value to your company's operations. That's one side of things. And then, like I was talking about before, you have aspirations, machine learning engineer, and company that require substantial more work on the theoretical and practical sides. And unless you are brilliant, it's at least a multi-year journey. And even outside of just the data science and machine learning, I want to stress also just how important basic prompting can be for everybody. And pretty much, especially any line of work where you're doing repeatable tasks, or using data in any sense or any aspect, just basic prompting goes a long way. And it's often a really good starting off point once you learn that, and maybe once you're using code interpreter and maybe some analysis function in ChatGPT, that can be a good starting off point for maybe getting into more theoretical and technical aspect of machine learning.
Tanner, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking your time off the project. You're an incredible machine learning engineer and data scientist, and now Amazon Web Services certified expert. I'm really blessed to have you on a team.
Thank you.
And be learning from you.
Yeah, likewise. I'll learn from you and everyone else in the team as well. So it's a two-way street.
Before we go in the part 2 of this conversation with Tanner, we are talking about quite sad reality of working in the AI field, what businesses really need beyond machine learning engineers, and Tanner's views on prompt engineering. I hope I'm going to see you there.